Hello friends, welcome back to Liz's Reading Corner, or welcome if you're new here. I'm Liz and I like books, and today I am reading something I wouldn't normally read. We have been kind of following the, controversy that is going on in Hollywood right now, and I was curious as to what this book was about and just how problematic it is and whether it actually stands up to what people are saying about how problematic it is. And so I have decided to read some Colleen Hoover. I'm going to start with this book and we'll see how it goes. I may read more, I may not read more. If things are the way that people have put in their reviews, I probably won't be reading more, but we'll see. So I'm going to read it. It probably will not take me very long because it's not a very big book, and from what I've seen in the reviews, it doesn't really take much brain power to read it. So we'll see how we go. I will be back very shortly. I'll be back very shortly. So, oh my god. I finished this very quickly. Like, very, very quickly. It took me like 2 hours to read or something. Honestly, a little bit disgusted, a little bit not surprised, because I did read a lot of reviews going into this. I've seen a lot of people's reviews about it. I've seen all of the things on Instagram, YouTube, like I've seen people's reviews, but I understand why her writing, if all of her writing is like this, is considered problematic. I get it, because I don't even really want it next to me. So I also read like the author's note at the end, which I very rarely do, but I was curious as to what was going to be in there. Allegedly, and I say allegedly because like all we have is her word for it, she wrote this to bring awareness to DV, because there is a not insignificant amount of domestic violence in this book, and I'm all for raising awareness for things. Like, absolutely, we should be talking about these things. We should be talking about uncomfortable things. Highly, like, it's something that needs to be done. Apparently, her mother was in a relationship that was full of DV with her father. So her father is an abuser, basically. And yeah, so she asked her mother if she could basically just like write this story, because that was what her mother experienced and that was what she experienced growing up in a household with DV. And like I said, I'm all for raising awareness for DV, but this, while it talks about DV, does it in a problematic way, because the main character, Lily, grows up in a household full of domestic violence, and her father is really quite violent towards her mother. And she swears to herself that she will never allow anything like that to happen to her. Then she meets Ryle, who is a neurosurgeon, and Ryle is like this playboy. Like, he refuses to have a relationship. He'll only ever have one-night stands. He doesn't believe in relationships and marriage, and he never wants to have children because he thinks he's too selfish for children. And which, like, power to you if that's how you think you are, and you are aware of that and you stick to those morals and all that sort of thing. Cool. And the first time that Ryle meets Lily, he is literally begging her to have sex with him. He's like he gives you just the ugh from the start. And aside from that, so where they meet is on like a rooftop, and Lily is like sat on the edge of this rooftop, and Ryle just bursts through the door and literally just starts like beating up on a chair. And so he very obviously has a temper right from the start. It is made very obvious he has a temper. With me, I'm not going with someone who that is like, no, that's not a healthy out for dealing with whatever it is you've got going on inside of you. That's not. And it kind of is sort of like a foreshadowing for what's to come. And so, unsurprisingly, Lily and Ryle end up in a relationship. Their relationship develops really, really quickly. They go from like not dating or just seeing how things go to dating to married very, very quickly. In amongst all of this, Ryle's sister ends up working for Lily. So Lily opens a florist shop. It's something that she's always wanted to do. She's always loved growing plants. She loves nature. She loves being out in nature. And her dream has always been to open a florist. And she's bought this shop, and she's like sort of looking around it with her mother, and Alyssa just like busts in and is like, I'm going to work for you. And she just starts working for Lily. She doesn't actually need the job. Her husband is actually a multimillionaire. He writes like programs for Apple or something and sells like updates for millions and millions of dollars every couple of months. So this is just like a hobby for Alyssa. And when they're cleaning up the shop, Lily falls and hurts herself, and Alyssa calls her husband, who is drinking at a bar down the street with her brother, and that's where they realize that Ryle is actually Alyssa's brother and how they all know each other. And so Lily and Ryle end up in this relationship. They go from not dating to married very, very quickly. But in amongst all of this, there is a couple of incidents where Ryle really shows his true colours. He is at Lily's place, and they're cooking, or she was cooking something for him, and they get sidetracked, and then they remember that there was something in the oven, and Ryle goes to take it out of the oven without using oven mitts. They've been drinking, and burns his hands. And while he has his hand under the water, Lily is like sat on the bench top and is laughing at him, and he pushes her off the bench top and she hits her head. And then he's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I did that to you, I just lost my temper. And that's the first time where Lily's like, oh my god, he's just injured, like he's just hurt me deliberately, I can't believe he did that. And she sort of like gets angry, and she pushes him away, and he falls and he cuts his hand on a piece of glass. And then she's like freaking out because, oh my god, he has like this really important surgery on Monday, and now I've just injured his hand again, and it's my fault. And so she sort of like blames herself and forgives him for hurting her. And they sort of set up these boundaries where he is to walk away whenever he gets angry. So he has to walk away and come back when he's calmed down, and then they will talk, which is something that I'm all for. That's like, if my husband and I don't fight, if we're angry with each other, we go and separate, and then we come back when we've calmed down, because that is a mature way of dealing with things. That's how you should be dealing with things, instead of yelling and screaming at each other, because that is counterproductive. And so while I agree with making that agreement about like walking away and coming back, that's not necessarily what happens. So a little bit down the track, Ryle finds out about Atlas. So he knew about Atlas from like the first time that they met. But Atlas is this boy who was homeless, and he lived in this house, this abandoned house that is behind Lily's house. And for a couple of months they were like not dating, but they were like seeing each other, and they were really, really friendly, like really, really close. And Lily obviously fell in love with him, and he goes away to Boston, and because his uncle lives there, and then he comes back on his 16th birthday, and they sleep together. And then because Lily's father hears her talking to someone, Lily's father comes in and beats the crap out of Atlas and almost kills him. And then that's the last time that Lily sees him. And so Lily goes to this restaurant with her mother, and it turns out to be Atlas's restaurant. And Ryle finds out eventually who Atlas is, and that it's his restaurant, and he loses his shit, and that causes another fight. And in that fight, he pushes Lily down the stairs, and she's like, that's it, because she said to herself the first time that she would never allow it to happen again. But he pushes her down the stairs and is like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'm really sorry, I can't believe I did this. And yet again, she sort of blames herself, and she sort of makes excuses for him, and it's just not, to me, it's not on. Like, I would have left after the first time, but that's me, and I understand that not everyone is like me, but it really is frustrating when you're writing a book that is about domestic violence and meant to be raising awareness for domestic violence, and you're putting in there basically excuses and apologies for the abuser, because that's how it reads. And then, she gets back with him, she stays with him, and then they go and buy an apartment downstairs from his sister's apartment, from Alyssa's apartment, and then he attacks her again, and then attempts to rape her, and she separates from him, but she still sort of makes excuses for him, and I just can't. I understand. Sorry, I'm going to put this down because I'm really frustrated with even looking at that cover. I understand that this is how victims work. Victims will blame themselves, and they will make excuses, and they'll apologize, and it's never the abuser's fault. And I just wish it had been framed differently to how it is, because it doesn't feel like, until like the very, very, very end of the book, it doesn't feel like you're meant to be sympathetic towards the victim, towards Lily. And it really does, in my opinion, glorify domestic violence. That's how it feels. And like I said at the start, I'm down for raising awareness for domestic violence. I think that is very important. I think it is very important to be raising awareness for all sorts of things, but domestic violence is one of those things. And I think it's important to understand that domestic violence occurs regardless of age, social status, race, sex. It can be, anyone can be a victim, and anyone can be an abuser. And I think it's good for authors to be trying to raise awareness, and she almost gets there, but for me, the issue is that she wrote a sequel to this, and it turned into money, and it turned into something about money. I don't think it should have had a sequel. I don't think it needs to go any further. I think it should have stayed where it was, because quite frankly, it's not a very well written book, but it really does, to me, glorify domestic violence, and that is not acceptable to me, because we should not be glorifying domestic violence. We shouldn't be making excuses for abusers, and we shouldn't be making excuses and blaming victims. And it feels like it's victim blaming in the way that she writes how, like, Lily is blaming herself. We shouldn't be victim blaming. Like, it's just awful. I do like that there is this little section at the end where Lily is talking to her mother about what happened, and after she's left Ryle, and her mother says, know your limit. I think that in the entire book is the most profound part, because her mother explains that the first time it happens, you'll be like, oh my god, and then you'll have like this limit set in your mind, but every time the abuse happens, you allow just a little bit more, and the abuser will push it just a little bit further, and the victim will just be like, oh my god, it was so bad, I'm never going to let him do that to me again. But then the next time won't be as bad, and they'll be like, oh, it wasn't as bad as last time. And so their limit keeps increasing until it's just too late, and they just feel like they can't leave, because it's like either sunken cost fallacy, or it's like, well, I've dealt with this for 5 years now, what's another 5 years? And I do really like that bit, that more than the rest of the book really shows what it's like to be a victim of domestic violence. So I think that tiny little bit is the only good bit in the entire book, because the rest of it is awful. I think it was very poorly written. I think it quite honestly, when I was talking to my husband about it just before I started filming this, it felt like it was written by a teenager who has absolutely no understanding of relationships, and it just felt like it was kind of like a fanfic style. Like, it just didn't feel like a polished, finished book. Honestly, I think it could have been edited like 2 or 3 more times and it would have been much better than what it is. But it just feels like an unfinished, unedited book written by a teenager. The timeline also is really bad. So it jumps ahead in timeline. So it'll be like 2 weeks later or a week later or 6 months later. It's just the jumps really feel awkward. And there is diary entries from Lily from when she was 16 or just before she turned 16 when she first met Atlas. And that's how we find out the story of Atlas and like what happened before she met Ryle. And they are just really poorly, really awkwardly placed in the story. Like, there's no sort of like lead into it. It's just, oh, I'm going to sit down with a glass of wine, I'm going to read this diary that I never wanted to pick up again. It doesn't work for me. So yeah, I won't be picking up any more Colleen Hoover books. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by this. So especially because from like the reviews that I've seen, most of her books are just as problematic as this one. And I just have no interest in reading or supporting someone who writes fiction like this. I don't like her writing style anyway, so she would never end up being one of my favorite authors, or even just an author that I'm interested in picking up her books just from like the library. I'm glad I got this one from the library and I didn't buy it. I'm glad I didn't buy any other books. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I think it's definitely problematic. I understand why people call it problematic, and I definitely won't be reading any more of her books. With all of that being said, have you read It Ends With Us? What did you think of it? As always, I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. If you like what I do here, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.